fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. Of course, I'm Al Lauren, and Mr. John Copenhaver is in the house today.
Hey, Al, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing well. So let's see. We've got a really good, big writer today. She's doing the new Robert B. Parker's Buzzkill, Sonny Randall book. Well, Alison Gaylin, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Wow. So, Alison, that's big shoes to fill, Robert Parker. How does one go about doing that? Like, well, first of all, how did you get into doing Robert B. Parker's writing?
They are big shoes to fill, very impressive shoes to fill. What happened was a couple of years ago at this point, it seems like just yesterday, Mike Lupica, who was writing the Sonny Randall books, he was chosen to take over for Ace Atkins, who was doing the Spencer books, leaving a space, an opening for the Sonny Randall books. Robert Parker passed away in 2010, and since then his estate has been keeping his characters alive by hiring various authors to take over. And what you aim to do is to replicate that wonderful style of his as best as you possibly can and keep the characters alive as best you can. So I think it was probably 2021. My agent was approached by the Parker estate, by their agent, and asked if I would be interested in writing the Sonny Randall books, trying out to write the Sonny Randall books. And I, of course, said, would I? So I was asked to write 20 pages. That was it. There was no instruction as to what the plot was supposed to be about. You know, it's just 20 pages with the characters. So, I don't know. I decided to do something about Instagram influencers. So I wrote 20 pages of Spike and Sonny, Spike, her best friend, talking about a case involving Instagram influencers. And then a couple weeks later, I heard that I'd gotten the job, and I was absolutely thrilled. It is big shoes to fill, but he has filled them so wonderfully, or had filled them so wonderfully for future writers by creating this amazing, colorful, and fun group of characters to work with. I always compare it to somebody giving me a toolbox full of really first-rate, incredibly expensive tools and telling me to build a table with it. It's just such a joy to write. So that was my first book, Bad Influence, that I wrote for them, and then I was hired to write another book, which is this one, Buzzkill. So, and happily, I'm going to be writing the next Sonny Randall book as well. So it's been a great experience and a very, very fortuitous one for me.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel a certain amount of pressure, but because someone that's had, a lot of readers and fans, and even Lupica who followed, and then following that, do you have it in the back of your mind, or are you conscious about what the readers might think as you're writing the book?
Well, I try to do the best I can, which is all I can do. There's always going to be, when you're doing something like that, if I'm in a Beatles tribute band, people are going to complain that I don't sound exactly like the Beatles. I just will do the best I can. So I try not to feel that amount of pressure. If I did feel it, I would never get any writing out. The one small advantage that I do feel that I have in a way over Lupica and Parker is that I'm a woman and it's a female character. So that's something that I can slip right into that they might have had to work a little harder to get into that head. So as far as that goes, I feel confident in writing the character. I try to make the style as much like Parker as I possibly can, but a bit of myself is going to kind of seep into it, and it's going to be different. I know that. It's just natural. I'm a different writer, but I do the best I can with it.
How do you manage characters? And I mean that because you've written your own books, and the way you see or hear or feel your characters in your own books compared to characters other people have written, characters that they've created, what's the difference in style for you? Like, how do you deal with that?
Well, these characters are all, pretty familiar to people, and I try to use as many of them as I can in a book as far as it makes sense to the plot, the familiar Parker characters. So, Sonny's dad has made a lot of appearances. Spike, who is, I think, one of my favorite characters in fiction in general, will always make appearances. Of course, Rosie, her dog. There are these characters, but I introduced some characters in the first book that I bring back in this book. And one of them, Blake James, who was one of the influencers, is now Sonny's receptionist. And I found that some of my characters fit in well with the Parker characters. So it's kind of, it's a bit of a balancing act. You don't want to force it. You don't want to force every single character from the Parker verse to make an appearance in a book, because you've got to do your best to serve the plot. But I try to use every character as best I can. And it is different from creating my own characters. I mean, they're pre-existing, making my own characters, of course, there's more freedom with that. But using these pre-existing characters that are already so fleshed out and well developed, it makes the process in a way, go a little faster because I don't need to figure them out. I find when I'm writing my own books that it's a process of I always compare it to being in a dark room and feeling around for the light switch, especially during the first draft. The Parker books, I don't have that feeling because the characters have already been created. They're already fully developed. They have their flaws. They have their past histories. They have, their particular brand of humor. So in a way, it makes it a little bit easier.
So what's the premise of this book, Buzzkill? Let's go over the basics of what happens in the book.
Okay, so the premise is in the previous book, Bad Influence, I introduced a really kind of heinous character by the name of Dylan Welch. Sonny has an altercation with him that winds up with him going to the hospital. He is very wealthy, very spoiled, just a real D-bag, basically. So just parties too much, and he's just a mess and very unpleasant. So he goes missing. But he is the head of an energy drink company. He's called Gonzo Energy Drinks. His mother, Lydia, makes Sonny an offer she can't refuse to try and find him. She's kind of in need of some extra cash at the beginning of the book, and his mother is more than willing and able to provide that cash. So Sonny goes through a brief moral dilemma of going to find a missing person she feels would be better off missing, but she takes the case. And then it turns out that maybe he's doing okay out there, but actually committing crimes while he's missing. I guess that's the best I can do without giving too many spoilers.
So, when you're writing, essentially adopting someone else's style, it's interesting because, I think, and Al, I thought that was a great place to start with, like, how difficult it is. But is it ever freeing to sort of be, in someone else's voice, in someone else's world? Is that,
Yes, John, it is.
Is it a relief?
Yes, it is a relief. It is freeing. I find it to be just like an escape, I wrote my book, We Are Watching, that comes out in January. I think, right before, I think I wrote the first draft before this book, took a break, and then went back and wrote something like that. I don't even remember how it went. It's all a horrible blur. But writing, taking on somebody else's characters, it's fun. It's like taking a vacation. It's interesting because I used to write for magazines until very recently, until I got the Parker books, actually. In a way, that was rather similar because I wrote for like gossip magazines, that have a very distinct style that's very different from my own, but it's a very distinct style. I can't write the way I would normally write an article when I'm writing for, In Touch Weekly or Us Weekly or whatever. They have a very specific style. And so I found that kind of freeing to just like use this other style. So writing the Parker books, they have this wonderful style. They have short chapters. There's a lot of dialogue. There is, as you mentioned this, this very specific group of characters. So it is like, it's kind of using a different part of your brain in a way. And it really is, it's a lot of fun. It's like more fun than I thought it would be.
Do you find that, as you're going back and forth between, your own work and, well, it's all your work, but the work with your, this not Parker's world, do you find that the voices, or do you ever find Parker influencing your own writing, or do they feel very separate in your mind?
They feel separate in my mind, but I do feel there has been a bit of an influence from Parker's writing, because he was so good in terms of pacing and dialogue, that I have found that my own books, my own writing has included more dialogue, and maybe the chapters have been a little bit shorter. I have kind of found myself in rewriting, paring down some of the description that I don't really feel adds to the plot or propels the plot. So I feel like writing the Parker books has helped me in terms of pacing.
Yeah, didn't Parker, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but didn't Parker write like a sequel to The Big Sleep? So which is sort of interesting, because he was, doing another writer's voice.
Yes, he was doing Chandler. That's right. Yes, that's right. I actually found that out recently. Yeah. So I know. Gosh, I wish a lot. The other Parker writers like Ace Atkins and Reed Coleman, who did the Jesse Stone books before, I think they both, and definitely Mike Lupica, had an opportunity to meet him and talk to him. And I would have loved to have talked to him to say, like, was it hard for you, filling those huge, enormous shoes,
Oh my gosh, can you imagine trying to pull off Chandler?
No, we definitely not.
It all come out sounding so cheesy in your head. It wouldn't work.
Yes, exactly. I would be doing like Guy Noir from Prairie Home Companion. Like doing some really terrible parody and like hating myself for it. Yeah, no, it really is interesting and very strange that he did a similar thing, and maybe that's something that his estate, that his sons and his wife, who's since passed away, maybe they thought of that or he spoke to them about that. Oh, I'd like to have other authors carrying on my work. It's good to do it with the blessing of his family, and they probably knew, well, he did it himself. So
yeah, I love that. I just love it. It's kind of an interesting tradition. I'm sure it's another, I don't know enough about other genres, but certainly a tradition in the crime world to sort of have the writers carrying on other writers.
Oh, absolutely. My dad was a big sort of spy thriller fan, and he was so happy that people took over for Robert Ludlum after he died, so he'd have more books to read, because he just had read all of them, and then he was like, "Yay, there's more!" So,
are you writing with an intention? Do you have when you put together a story like Buzzkill, is there a subtext or a meaning that you want the reader to take away from the book?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the one kind of subversive thing that I did with Buzzkill and Bad Influence, that a bookseller who posted me recently sort of picked up on. I've tried to put women in positions of power in these books. Sunny has always sort of been surrounded by men for the most part, and the PI genre in general tends to be very male dominated. Her father, she's very close to her father. She can't stand her mother. Her best friend is a man, Spike. She has a lot of friends on the police force, but they're all male. I have in this book a female CEO. I have the mother of the missing son, very strong personality, because I wanted to see Sunny interacting with women more. You don't see it all that much in the other books, although you do. He had some great female characters, one of which I'm bringing back into my next book. But and in Bad Influence too, I had these two influencers, and the woman was this very tough Eastern European woman who was very strong and, I will kill you type of a person. That's something that, that's sort of a little bit, I want to say it's like an agenda, but it's something that I just wanted to see more of myself. So, it is something that I put into the book just to make them a little bit slightly more female driven.
Yeah, well, I think that Parker was ahead, you're right, ahead of his time, and had a lot of characters, females and minorities, that were in a stronger position, especially in his timing.
Yeah, something I really love about Parker is, I mentioned Spike before, and there's another character, Lee Farrell, and Parker's sons are both gay, and he wrote these very strong, tough gay characters. And he really did that, from what I've heard, for his sons. Spike is just a dream of a character because he is just like a lethal weapon, can beat anybody up. And, and he's a gay man. And I have always thought, ever since I saw Papillon, I wanted to write a character like that. And I've always felt that, it just makes sense. A gay man, growing up, especially, one who grew up in a, slightly earlier generation, has to just be that much tougher. So it makes sense. So anyway, those are my favorite characters to write in that book. I'm really happy to have inherited them.
Are you conscious of how you write violence then? Because it's modern times, are you lighter on violence or action in the book than, let's say, Robert would have been?
That's interesting. No. No, I have pretty high body count in my Parker books, and I actually prefer it when the action happens on screen rather than Sonny getting a phone call saying, "Hey, somebody just shot your dad." You got to do that from time to time because they're all in first person. Sonny books are not excessively violent, but there is violence, and Sonny has a .38, so she shoots a gun. That's just part of her character. I can't not have her do that, but she's, conscious of it. She has a license, but there's a fair amount of, there's a body count in the Parker books, and I feel like they wouldn't be Parker books if I didn't have it. And
well, so the victims, the ones that die, the body counts, are you murdering people in real life?
Maybe subconsciously.
Yeah. I was going to say, maybe you take a character and, Yeah,
exactly.
Well, never know. Got to check. We'll take names and numbers, and we'll call them right now.
True.
So what do you think you get out of writing a book like this? What happens to you? Where does Alison go? Do you get some sort of, something with your own writing, or maybe something in life when you do a book?
I think it's interesting because I started writing as a kid, as kind of a shy, awkward, young kid. I found it to be an escape, to tell a story, to get involved in a story. And I think becoming a professional writer and, getting, nervous about, as you mentioned earlier, pleasing readers, selling books, et cetera, you get stressed out about it and you get away from that feeling a little bit. And I found with the Parker books, especially if times are tough or anything, it's an escape for me to be able to tell one of those stories and to get involved in that world, that wonderful world of Boston that he created. It is something of an escape. And there's a lot of pleasure to be found in that. And so I've kind of rediscovered that feeling in telling these stories. It's been interesting. And it's not something I really expected, but I really have found that. I really found that.
Do you notice there's a difference in your process? I'm thinking particularly in terms of creating a story, plotting or structure, when you're doing a Parker book versus one of your own sort of standalone books. Do you think that the process is different, or do you think there's not as much difference as we might suspect?
I think the process is a bit different in that all the Parker books are first person and they're mysteries. So I never am an outliner, but I feel like I do a little bit more outlining with the Parker books because it's easier to do. My books, the collective was a first person, but it was sort of a different first person. And when you're writing in that type of first person, you have to figure out, it's almost like you're not, because you have to figure out what's going on at the same time from that type of standpoint. And I find myself sort of drawing up timelines for my own books, but not outlined so much. And then with the Parker books, I kind of start with a sort of a loose outline, and just, because I know that it's going to be a slightly more linear story. And from one point of view of somebody who's trying to figure out what's going on. That's usually not my characters. My characters are things that things happen to them, and then they have to find out what's going on. This is somebody who is actively just trying to find out what's going on. So it's a little bit, a little more outlining, I would say, as far as the process goes. And also sort of keeping the tone. It's a different tone than in my books. I don't want to necessarily say it's lighter, but I have more room for humor. And in fact, with this one, I got notes on my first draft, like, make this a little funnier, make this a little funnier. And I like that note because I'm like, oh, good. I can just put a joke in there, so that makes the process different too. Like, having room for humor and sort of witty exchanges and things, which, it's a lot of times in my books, they might be, there's humor in everything, right? But, my books are a little darker and there might not be as much time for that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm in the midst of teaching an introduction to crime fiction class, and one reason why The Big Sleep is on my mind is because I'm teaching it. I forgot how funny it is. Like, you usually think of it as just dark and twisted and, the sort of cynical, but it's actually a pretty hilarious book in a lot of ways.
So, that's great, and how great to be going back over that again, and finding that.
You're like, oh. Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, there's humor. Yeah, it's an important part of it. So I understand that. I think that that's, and sometimes that can help you as, I don't know, you have to serve the story, I guess, but, certainly, I'm like, oh, maybe I need to put more humor in my own voice, in my own writing,
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a balancing act, because it's like, you'd like to put humor in things, but you don't want it to be a distraction or to take away from the story. So, it's, I think it just depends on the characters and the story, whether you have room for that.
Yeah, I think there has to be a timing to it as well as the way you do it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's got to be a certain style of more like how even Chandler or anybody did it. There's kind of a put down to yourself or to the character as well as what's going on rather than making fun of something.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think the best person to make fun of in life and in fiction is yourself. But, yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong there, right?
No, that's why I do well on radio, because I have so much to make fun of. I could go on probably for another 20 years like this, just talking about how funny it is to be me.
Exactly.
So, Alison, in your standalone books, which admittedly I'm more familiar with, I mean, I feel like there's certainly a clear sort of theme and message coming through. And I wondered, in terms of, I guess this is sort of another process question, forgive me, but are you aware of the same thing in the Parker books? Are you aware of more of the story? Are you aware of, I have this thing to say through this book?
I think I'm a little more aware of the story, but it's interesting because I wind up sort of saying something. So in Bad Influence, it was a lot of it was just sort of about social media, Instagram culture, the idea of instant fame, people not being who they appear to be. All of those were themes that I sort of had in my head and found their way into the book. I always like contemporary themes, whether they're in my books or in the Parker books. And then in Buzzkill, the idea of energy drinks, the allure and sort of danger of them. I had read a lot of stories about kids, getting serious health issues and even dying from energy drinks because they might not have been aware that they had heart issue or whatever. There's a tremendous, insane amount of caffeine and sugar in these things, and they're not terribly healthy. So I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about wealth. Wealth is, the disparity of, wealth and what you can sort of get away with if you're an extremely wealthy person. So all of that kind of found its way into Buzzkill. Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about writing crime fiction, and I know this is true of your books, John, too, is that you wind up addressing a lot of sort of social issues, whether you want to or not, because you're setting it either, even if it's historical, you're setting it in a particular time. And you're writing about crime, which is such a societal type of a thing. So you sort of wind up addressing these social issues, whether it's conscious or unconscious.
Except we laugh about this, but are you worried about kind of backlash when you cover such topics,
Yeah, you're going to get it no matter what. No matter what you write, no matter what it is, they're going to, there are going to be people that, take offense. And again, it's just something you gotta not necessarily ignore, but it's like anything else, like any type of writing, there's going to be people who like it and people who don't like it. And when you're telling a story and you're telling it through the eyes that you're looking through around the world that you're looking at, it's going to have a point of view, A lot of people seem to get offended by people even mentioning COVID in their books at all. And it's like, you can't write a book that takes place in recent times without mentioning the word COVID. So, I mean, that's one example. And there are people that might, think that you're trying to say something political when actually you're just trying to say this thing existed, for a certain amount of time and we were living in it. And this is when I'm setting my book. So yeah, I don't think you can really escape it, right? I'm John, I'm sure you've gotten it too. It's just,
well, John works for Bill Gates, you can tell.
Yeah, true. He probably works for Bill Gates.
Yeah.
I wrote a book called Never Look Back, and there was a part of it was based on the Charles Starkweather Fugate, crime spree, and how she was basically kidnapped and taken.
Right.
Murderer, but people viewed them as a duo and, made movies about them.
Yeah.
But she was a 14-year-old kid. Anyway, I wrote about that, and it was a crime based on that. It wasn't that crime. It wasn't a true crime book. But I had a scene where a cop gets killed, where they kill a cop, and people got so angry about it. I'm like, this guy's a criminal. This is a criminal doing something. I'm not making a comment that I don't believe that officers of the police should be murdered by people. That's not the point that I'm trying to make. But I did get people that just got angry about it.
Yeah. Well, so often it's just it's some kind of experience that the reader is bringing to what you've written and offering up an interpretation that's not even there.
Yeah.
And I feel like half the time the things that people get upset about are not at all anywhere really in the text. It's like, yes. I teach in an MFA program, and I'm always like sort of letting my students know that yes, you need to listen to feedback and consider it, but believe me, you have to also interpret it. You can't just take it.
Absolutely. It's always, you have to kind of think about where something is coming from. And as you said, have compassion, but don't let it sink in and hurt you and keep you from writing, And
on that sort of topic, I ask, since I am a teacher, I teach a lot of aspiring writers, are the things that you feel like over the years you've learned, or I guess essentially, would advise aspiring writers of any age? Like, do you think there are things that you've learned over the years? And I would love to know, maybe sort of in addition to that, what made you want sort of make the decision to write as Robert B. Parker? Is that part of your sort of learning process?
Yeah. Okay. So the advice that I would give is, everybody always says, be persistent, keep getting out there, keep sending your stuff out, if you get 1,000 no's, but you'll get a yes. Okay, that's good. But the great thing about writing is you can rewrite. And a lot of times when people do reject you, they give you good constructive criticism that you can use. And they call it constructive criticism for a reason. Don't be so persistent. That persistent doesn't mean inflexible. It means persistent in rewriting is part of persistence. That's part of it. So listen to constructive criticism, take it in and rewrite. And, that's the one thing in life that actually tends to get better as you get older is your writing. So just keep trying to grow and change and push the envelope. And I would kind of link, writing Parker into that. That was it's a real challenge. It's different for me. It's writing a woman created by a man in 1999. That's when he created her, who a very respected man. And I'm writing in a way that I'm hoping that his family appreciates. That's really what I think of. And that's the main feedback that's the most important to me, is that of his family. So that's a challenge, and that's pushing myself, and it's pushing myself to do something different, and it's pushing myself to not impose my style on to someone else, but to take in that person's style and do the best I can at it and keep trying to settle into it more and more. So I feel like it's, have a thick skin, be receptive to improving, I guess. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. That sounds like great advice. Yeah. I think you're right that you get hard-headed with your persistence, but not here.
Yes.
Pivoting I think that's a great advice. And I think it can be easy to sort of like the thick skin goes up, but then it may cover your ability to like change, and that's not the intention.
Yeah. A lot of times, I'll get like a really, let's say detailed letter from my editor, and I find that I have to like back up, let it sink in, and then see what I can do with it afterwards. So like take a couple of days. Don't let it affect you immediately. Don't take a couple of days, get some perspective, and then come back to it.
Just write your editor in and kill them off in a treacherous way.
You can do that too. Yes.
Send it back to the editor, and they're being murdered in the book, really long and drawn out.
They love that, I'm sure.
Yes, totally.
It's amazing how actually great editing can open up creative avenues. I think that the best... my agent does a lot of editing, and she's marvelous at giving me suggestions. They really inspire me, which is like, the best.
Yeah, I think that's another good advice, is to find the right person, not too many people. Sometimes, if you're getting notes from everybody in the workshop, it can be paralyzing. But if you find the right person who is able to really see what you're trying to do with something, whether it's your agent or your editor or your best friend or, your spouse, whatever, that's invaluable. If they can look at what you're trying to do and help you do it better, that's really a great thing to find.
So what do you got coming up next? What's coming up for Alison now that this is done and you're doing the promo for the new book? But what you'll be working on something else?
Yes. I have a book that's coming out at the end of January, and it's called We Are Watching. And it's about a normal family whose life is sort of turned upside down when they're targeted by a group of conspiracy theorists who read things into their work that isn't there.
So you think the guy's a true crime writer, and then
it plays right into our conversation. The mom wrote a book when she was 15 years old that a group of people are convinced sort of predicted and caused the apocalypse. So that's sort of what it is.
So it's a comedy.
Sounds great.
It's a fun.
Yeah, it's a comedy. It's laugh out loud funny.
Yeah, it's a real positive, inspiring.
A lot of witty banter.
Very, very happy theme there. That's good.
Yes.
Are you doing social media? Do you have a website? How do you like readers to interact, and how do you like them to interact with you?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Alison.Gaylin. I'm on Twitter, X, at Alison Gaylin. And I have a Facebook author page. I like interacting with people on all of those things. And I also have a website, which is just www.alisongaylin.com. And I have news and things on there, and then links to my social media as well.
Well, fantastic. We'll have that up on our website so people can find you, and talk about you and your good books. And
Terrific.
we appreciate it. So now the book, Robert B. Parker's Buzzkill, Sonny Randall, Book 12. Alison Gaylin, thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure talking to you both.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.